All righty. Any public comment? Okay.
I don't know if this is public comment, but I wanted to apologize for leaving kind of abruptly last meeting to go talk to the select board. And I felt like my comment as I was leaving wasn't helpful, and I appreciate all the discussion that was in the minutes.
You were the one other voice, though. It was a bummer that we didn't have you. But no worries. It happens. All right. Any comments on the minutes? Hi, Megan.
Hi, did we start before 7?
Sorry.
I have 7:01.
Oh, okay.
You're very prompt.
I know, I gotta get with the cover now.
Happened fast.
Just
I
because
had-
they say that doesn't mean.
Right, I know. It's nice in here.
Yeah, you can have a longer PC meeting if you want.
Yeah.
Be in the.
Use our climate
AC. Sorry.
I tried to fix the address of the meeting because it was at the WCS dining room.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay,
Thank you.
cool. I did a couple edits like in that first paragraph. It just said flexible widths and didn't say what it was. That was wide. Yeah. So I added driveway. Yes. And, yeah, I had a question here. The, that item is called request to add transportation and warehousing.
Mhm.
But then we didn't actually identify anything about transportation in there. In the end, it says their request is to add warehousing and distribution. And I wasn't sure if that was like a mismatch or if that was,
No, I should have clarified that.
okay,
So the North America Industry Classification System
Right.
code is codes that start with 48 and 49 are transportation and warehousing.
got it.
So it covers, both the building full of stuff and the loading docks and the trucks coming and
I
going
see,
from the
okay.
building essentially.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I figured there was an AICS code in there somewhere, but
yeah, that we can clarify that.
I wasn't sure if the code was actually distribution or if it was transportation. And just figured we'd want to be consistent.
Yep.
So just some clarifying things that I added in there and added H to my name a few times. Which is harks back to a long time ago when there was somebody who took a while to catch on that I had an H when I first joined the point.
Oh, might have been me.
Long time ago. No, I don't think it was. But, sorry. And then this last piece, I wondered if, because they mentioned the fact that wastewater, they have an on-site wastewater facility at the Williston.
Yeah, they have their own treatment plant.
But it's not on the site. It's.
No, I
in
know, it's in
Essex,
Essex,
Yeah.
but I just wonder if we should clarify that here, because it says residential was also considered, could work, but with caveat that on-site wastewater would be needed. And I wasn't quite sure about the word on-site. Or whether that would be part of the municipal system. Or if they were open to some kind of wastewater agreement using the existing facility. So just because they did point out that it's currently served by their own
Mhm.
facility.
Maybe just that wastewater could be a challenge or something, or that wastewater.
They said at one point that if it was some other housing development, they would not want the
Exactly,
wastewater
right,
to go
right.
through their system.
Sure. So
So, like,
then
that felt
maybe
pretty
we
clear to
should
me.
just clarify that a little bit because it is such a huge deal. And, you know, currently it's not a huge deal because they just use their own on-site facility, but in a future scenario with a future buyer and a different land use, that on-site facility would not be available.
Right, you'd be,
And yeah, so I don't know, it was just kind of like,
That that wastewater treatment, would have to be a consideration or would be.
Yeah, something
would
I
have-
think that's what
Yeah.
that sentence is supposed to say though, so I think we just need to clarify the sentence. That sentence is supposed to say, if you did residential, you would have to build
Right.
wastewater.
right,
Mhm.
maybe
So-
I'm being too picky.
No,
Maybe
no, I think we just, no,
get
if
rid of
you,
the
if
word
it,
on-site.
if you weren't, if you didn't understand it, then it's not clear. I think we would just,
Wastewater treatment.
wastewater treatment would need to be built or
Or
something.
something
Mhm.
addressed.
Would need to be. Hmm. Addressed. How's that?
Thank you, sorry to be so picky.
No, 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 it's fine. That is good. Cause I think it is important that that's probably the biggest,
Yeah. Right.
barrier to something like a housing development,
Mhm.
one of the big. Anything else?
From someone who wasn't at the meeting, it seems like the reading the minutes, the takeaways or everything kind of focused on what the planning commission was like, their response, like our response as a planning commission to them. Was there any response back from them when there was kind of pushback on like, we don't wanna adjust the zoning for something we don't know is coming yet? Did they have a response back to that? Cause I don't know if they're, like, it didn't seem like if they had a response back, it was captured in the minutes, like if they were like, sure, we're flexible to that, or they're like, no, we're not flexible to that, or, you know, if they responded, it's not in.
I think they just kind of were like, okay, we'll go back to talk to our people.
Okay.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
wasn't-
one thing, I don't remember if it was in the minutes or not. But they did say that they were. You know, they were maybe gonna explore if they warehoused their own stuff or stuff that they were buying from
That's okay.
distributors. Would we be more amenable to something like that? And everybody was sort of like, yeah, that seems fine, because it's like your property and that, you know, you would be, it's the like selling it or leasing it to a third party to do something new versus
Yeah.
like them having it. So that would still require something to change,
It
right?
would, I mean, at a minimum, we'd have to seek clarity about, we have the allowed use in the district of manufacturing. There is no manufacturing happening in the district. There really never has been. What there's been is other functions of a manufacturing company that is on the other side of the river. And I would look at the warehousing kind of the same way, but it's also just been a long time since anyone's made any kind of formal decision about anything on this property at all. So at a minimum, in the zoning administrator's seat, I'd be talking to the town attorney saying, can I sign a permit that says Global can just, warehouse stuff in their empty buildings? Do we need a bylaw amendment to bring some clarity? And we have some parallel, like adaptive reuse of existing buildings or continued use of non-conforming buildings over in mixed-use commercial and up on Hurricane Lane, where the plan was not to build lots more warehouses, but to acknowledge that the ones that were there could continue to be used, modified, have more done to them than if they were strictly non-conforming. So I'd probably come back with a bylaw tweak if that was really a live issue, for them.
Maybe then in, above page 6, or if you scroll up just a little bit where it says, what if Global Foundries wanted to invest in warehouse use? The second paragraph on that page, we just say like the owner inquired on
Yeah.
what would be needed if they wanted to expand their own warehousing. Their own warehousing operations. If that's in alignment with what happened.
Great point. That was really it though.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were sort of. In an exploratory, like, what are you guys open to phase? Um,
I think they look good then.
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
I'm gonna abstain because I felt it more important to get my willow tree out of the road than attend the meeting. So, silly thing on my part.
can I get a second? Anybody? Second, okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed?
I wasn't there either. Do you need us to vote for quorum?
Rules, can I get some a rules check?
No, so how many people weren't there? 2, 3?
I wasn't there either.
You can vote if you weren't there,
Yeah. as long as
there's
you've read the
6 of
minutes.
us here, so we need 4 to carry the minutes.
Well, I'd probably say aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, so.
Melinda, a big rules check. All right. Q3 report.
Oops. All right.
Up there. So I think, like I maybe talked about the last time we put one of these on the agendas, the first thing was just to make the planning commission aware that we produce these quarterly reports. The select board has asked that what we do is give them some sense of comparatively what's happening with development activity. I would argue, take everything with a big grain of salt. Williston's a pretty small place. Things change a lot, and when you divide it, even by years, let alone quarters, they change even more. But we do have a sense of, what's going on. Q3 in terms of project cost was lower than our 10-year average project cost. And these are not inflation adjusted. This is just what people state on their permit, what they're spending on their projects. You can kind of see how variable it is in Q2. The green bar is really tall because we had one really big building permitted. 66 unit apartment building at the annex, and the bar gets really big. So just take it with that grain of salt. And then the second chart is the number of dwellings, again by quarter. There is like a little bit of a pattern. It's not much of when people come in to permit dwellings. And again, you see the big apartment building last quarter and not much activity in Q3. New chart for this one is the housing targets chart. So this is just plotting what we anticipate our assigned housing targets to be. They haven't been formally assigned yet, but that middle bar is roughly that 3,200 units by 2050. And the shaded underneath line is where we're at on the quarter. So we were ever so briefly ahead of our goal. And now we're not. And you can see that just goes off to 2028, but that's a 2050 track. You just have to zoom in to see what's going on. Last two charts on the first page. I should have loaded one that didn't have the draft watermark on it. I don't know why I did that, sorry. It is final. So this is just roughly sort of using the zoning districts as a proxy for what kind of use are we seeing investment in. And you can see a little bit just that residential or rural, which is essentially things happening either here in the RZD or in the ag rural district north of Mountain View Road, south of the highway. We're seeing a little more, relatively speaking, a little more money being spent there than on the 10-year average. But in total amount, less money spent on projects than the 10-year average. So, reflecting build out, economic trends, cost, whether people are deciding to do things or not, a little bit reflecting, 10 years captures a lot of the build out of something like Finney Crossing in it. So the amounts are just bigger in the green bar, the mixed use bar, as a result of everything that was going on with that. So that's just a rough comparison. And I don't have to belabor what's coming after that, oh, sorry, the pie charts are just, proportionally what's happening in those various districts.
Is that supposed to be Q2 though, in the left hand pie chart?
No, the left one is the 10-year average of all the third quarters preceding.
It's labeled Q2.
Also,
Oh, inside the pie should say Q3, sorry,
Okay.
or it should just not say a quarter. Gotcha,
Mhm.
because I think we dropped it in the other one. And again, I think the 10-year average having the big green slice is reflective of mostly Finney Crossing. That's what I see when I look at this. Not that there's been a wave of RZD development. And then we just do our staff news and what some of our committees have been up to. So if you're interested, there it is. We have slowly started recruiting and adding DRB members. We're getting closer to full strength there. We will work on our other vacancies as well. Also during Q3, Colin started with us up front. If you haven't met Colin at the front counter, he's our planning technician, doing great. And there's a little bit even about you all in there, so there you go.
do you typically get much feedback on this? Do
No.
you hear anything back?
No, so two things, when we create these, we submit them to the manager's office, they go into a package that's given to the select board ahead of the meeting, but that package is not published on the town website. In other words, all of the select board handouts don't end up on the website the way we do for, PC and DRB. We put these on our website, just, hey, we spent some time making them, we might as well put them somewhere. I've not gotten a lot of feedback from the select board either way. I hope that they're finding it useful. We've talked internally over the last couple of years that we've been doing these about, what's a useful number, what's a useful metric to give them to help them understand what's going on. But if nothing else, it's an opportunity to communicate out what the planning office is up to. So we like to use it for that.
Yeah, it's a good record of accomplishments.
And in future agendas, I'll probably just drop a link to past quarterly reports in the bottom of the agenda, and you can just kind of use it like a dashboard. We're also probably gonna try to, what I've asked Emily to start trying to do is use the issuance of the quarterly report as an occasion to do a short planner's corner, even if it's the only thing, just call it planner's corner and send it out and say, hey, people on our email list, something forum, here's what we're up to. So,
Also, we should use it when we do our annual report, we could just go back.
yeah, you can grab your 4 quarters and do that. But as you look at those, if any of you have suggestions of information that you think should be in there or that serves as a good indicator. There's a side project that if you got here early, you would have heard Melinda and Hannah excitedly talking about where we're working on our reporting and accountability on achievement of town plan actions and how we're gonna sort of create a dashboard around that. Definitely going to be talking more about achievement of town plan actions in the quarterly report as that picks up, because I think just keeping that dialogue going and keeping the idea that we have a town plan, it directs the actions of the town. We're all working on achieving those actions. Having that, just talking about it whenever you can makes a lot of sense. So that's on our list already, but anything else you can think of, we're happy to.
Just going back to the previous meeting, I think when we get sort of these one-off requests, it is really good to look back at the town plan. Like, I think we did get to that at that meeting, but just to be like, okay, does it achieve one of these goals? And then if it doesn't, and it's gonna take a lot of time, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Mhm.
I think it can be a good metric.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else, quarterly reports? Bylaw amendments.
Yeah, so we'll focus on Taft Corners tonight. Some of you may have heard me mention that through some funding through the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, we were able to get some help from Jeff Farrell, who wrote our form-based code for us all the way back in 2020, 2021, and 22. Jeff's zoomed in tonight. He's gonna be in town arriving on Memorial Day, so right after the holiday weekend. And I'm hoping to arrange for some time on that Tuesday afternoon, the 26th, when any of you and other folks from some of our other boards could show up, do a little bit of a walk around with Jeff in Taft Corners. Staff will be there. We can talk through some of the things we've encountered in the code, and some of the areas that Jeff might help us make some draft revisions to. Also had one other thing about that. Oh, just for folks who were here for the big meeting with the people who wanted to put the hotel next to Bed Bath and Beyond, might be worth digging up those minutes or looking at that agenda and submission again and thinking about some of what you saw as the kind of how far apart the proposal was from what the code was asking for. And there's a few things in the code that Emily and I identified that you know the commission might consider some informed adjustments to, but also thinking about, you know, what's your North Star for buildings, especially that are going to be on something like Trader Lane. So I wanted to give Jeff a few minutes just to introduce himself. The only document I linked to for this was the draft scope of work that Jeff and I came up with so that we could get him working. And it's really a starting point. The only other caveat is we've basically got Jeff through the end of June, because this is a FY 26 project. Jeff's good at being called up after the fiscal year closes and still poking at things if we need to, but we want to get the bulk of the work with the planning commission done in the next month and a half or so. So take it away, Jeff.
Okay, I don't have very far to take it, but in general, hello, I'm Jeff. For those of you who've already met me, that's probably enough, but I'm a consultant. We write form-based codes, and the unhidden secret is that involves urban design. And it's, you know, making places. Right now, we're doing a little bit of work with Winooski, actually not connected with their form-based code, which we did, I think, in 2014. Anyway, a long time ago. And we're at the tail end of a form-based code for Northfield, the huge metropolis of Northfield, which is a pretty cool place. But on this, really, whatever, and I'm not against the scope of work, but we're very open. We're excited to get a chance to come back and do some fine tuning, and, you know, whether it's correcting things that we wish we'd done differently back in 2002, or just there's been some learning, 2022, sorry. You know, experience teaches. On the other hand, you know, it's too bad we don't have 5 or 10 buildings to look at, but that's just life. I feel like my working life has been cursed by foreign wars and odd national political situations that keep bringing these disruptions to the economy. But I'm looking forward to being up there and learning from you.
And some of us, myself and Emily and Melinda, have been able to, over the last couple of years, was it a year or two ago, Jeff, you were up doing Winooski stuff and we got to check in Williston.
Mhm.
And earlier this year, we got to take a walk around both the constructed buildings on Market Street, and we went and walked some of the future path of Trader Lane. One of the issues in the scope of work is to think about some of the grades we're contending with over on that Trader Lane side, and you may recall some of that came up with the hotel proposal as well. So want to work through that, but there's no substitute for getting your feet on the ground. If you can't make it on the 26th, just taking a short walk along Market Street and looking at those couple buildings, especially the multi-story ones, thinking about what works, what doesn't. And, you know, we have the staff perspective of what it took to administer permits there, and what were the things we had the big fights with the architects about, and what were the things the architects were just kind of fine with. And we can have that kick off our conversation. So,
Oh.
I'll warn a meeting that says, probably something like starting around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 26th, there might be a quorum of the planning commission. Historic, and design advisory committee and whoever else we decide might show up. So we can spend some time, on site.
Can I ask a, um. This might not be appropriate, but we've talked about and I'm gonna forget the name of that district, the Home Depot, Walmart district. Is there any space here to get Jeff's feedback on how task corners could or couldn't maybe flow into that space, or what we might consider? We're gonna do adjustments in that area?
I
Is
think,
that far outside the scope?
I think we might be able to talk about it. I mean, I know. Jeff's answer and my answer when we were adopting the code was that should have all just been in the FBC district, and there was a compromise made. That said, the future construction of Depot Street, which is the street that would take you from 2A down toward Home Depot and really open up that mixed use, it all ties into Trader Lane, and it ties into the FBC area. And what I love to get out of this from the planning commission is if you do go out and walk around where Trader Lane is gonna be and you take that look to the south. What would you want to envision showing up there? People had ideas when we did the FBC project in 2021. Do you have the same ideas? Do you have new and different ideas? You've had people come in with some other stuff like the sports dome idea, and some other sort of large site plan development ideas. It's worth us, getting that stuff written down at least as part of this, even if you don't come up with a whole
Yeah, so we
code.
need to get a whole code. I just think if we're gonna be there, we're gonna be walking around, we're gonna be talking about it, that area, that is the next kind of.
Yeah,
Sorry, that is not me as the chair, that's just me as a member. Do other people have thoughts on that? Go ahead, Chapin.
Sorry. I felt like Jeff, if he hasn't seen it, should see the master plan work of the Parks and Rec Department and the update on a community center idea. Because I feel as though since the 2022, when we were working on this with Jeff, there's been progress on some other goals. And in particular, I feel as though the empty Bed Bath and Beyond and the field opposite the town fair tire center and that whole area would benefit from being more municipal. And I don't know how we get there. The short of being more municipal, there's making places that can handle stormwater and be green spaces. Because still we're on a thing where everybody's putting their stormwater treatment on the site of their construction project. So to me, those are some challenges for Jeff to look at and some information that's happened since he was here last.
Was that an endorsement for working that into this scope of work?
Of course.
Chapin? Yes, okay.
Sure.
and I'll say, we've got, as you all know, we're juggling a bunch of different potential packages of bylaw amendments across, geographically across the whole town, and subject matter really broad as well. The goal with Jeff's work is not to necessarily roll right into adopting something, in the midsummer, but get that preliminary work done. And then, you all and we go to work on it, and then we figure out how it fits in our time frame of other stuff. And after we talk about this item, I put another item on the agenda to talk about some of the just converging things the planning commission will touch that are all sort of related to tap corners, including this.
Other thoughts on including that or not including that in the scope of work?
It makes sense, then we should include.
And does anybody have anything they can think of right away they want to say to us or to Jeff about, what's been built so far under the code. We're really just looking at the hotel and the apartment building next to it. Anything you can think of that you want to get out there right now, certainly have a little bit of time right now.
I've got an anecdotal comment that might be useful. We've been remodeling the bathrooms in the house, and the grandkids wanted to spend the weekends with us, which is nigh on impossible even when we have bathrooms that are working in the house. So we checked into the hotel there at right next to Healthy Living, not the
Home
Apple,
Place.
the Marriott property.
Yep.
And we spent a couple of nights there with them. And I was very deliberate, after talking to you a few weeks ago, I was very deliberate about being a visitor in Williston and walking around, not knowing it as I do, but kind of, if I'm here for the first time, what does this feel? What is it like? I gotta tell you, it's very welcoming. It's very walkable. People are kind, people are slow, people are deliberate. You can cross streets easily. There's lots to do, and people were using the little parks there in front of the farmhouse. It gave me a really good feeling. I mean, seeing it from a very different point of view. So for what that's worth, I realize it's anecdotal, but it was kind of interesting thing to see. Good. And the hotel is phenomenal, by the way, if you ever need visitors or whatever. Wow. Yes.
I felt as,
Oh, go ahead, Chapin.
no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, given the problems that I'm gonna say problems and also like problems and restrictions that the hotel applicant on Trader Lane ran into with grade, like Matt, you already called it out. In some ways we saw, we're like, this is the plan working, and there are things about it we should not change. But given that it's like such a high value area, like some consolidated effort, now that we know, like, oh, someone tried to build something here and they ran into these great issues, like I really think making sure we're like, actually, let's form a really solid vision so that when someone else comes back, we have already thought through and kind of streamline those things, because it is such a high value spot. And then on the flip side, the hotel, and kind of a feeling a lot of our conversation with that group focused on like, how do you fake having something real on the first floor? And I want to believe we cannot fake it. Like, I want to believe we get to have things on the first floor, and like the way that the hotel kind of fakes it with their windows, but you have shades, and it's meeting the form-based code. Visually, which is what a form-based code is, but it's not filling its full, it doesn't feel like it's filling its full use, and so I think it's just something to note, that the hotel also was like, how can we get around this thing you have on the first floor and these restrictions? So those are kind of my two areas of like noticing things.
I mean, I noticed that is a thing I noticed about the new hotel. And like, sort of hopeful that maybe one day, like, as it sort of, like, that this is a pretty new idea, and they were the first ones to do it, and like, maybe we'll get to a different place and space with it.
It'll convert to a
Yeah.
restaurant,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
knows, yeah.
Cause like, yes, it's noticeable. Chapin, did you have something?
Yeah, I was essentially going to add to what I said before. Part of the reason why I want to make sure we look at the Parks and Rec master plan and the community center is that when we were working on form-based code, I really thought we were going to be able to have a community park where the annex is going in. And it was towards the second half of our work on form-based code that it came out that it had been option had been purchased and it was going to be developed. So we lost the space for playing fields and open space there. And we actually lost twice, because then the select board excluded it from form-based code as well. But to me, it was the loss of the open space, which I thought was going to be that we might have had community gardens and things like that there. So to me, we still have no place for all these people in the no common community spaces that are open and I'm not saying this well, because we do have some areas that we've identified, like the water tower hill, to be space for people to visit. But I just feel as though we have not reserved. We're saying move thousands of people into this area, and yet we don't have somewhere to have a baseball field or a rec field of any kind. And I just feel like that's a high priority, is to do something about that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly when we get into bylaw amendments, the development standards that are in the code. The official map that dictates not just where the streets go, but where the green spaces go and where there's a desire for public dedication. All of those tools are open for amendment, and there is a little bit about, trying to make sure we coordinate those. There are some other changing conditions related to, since things were adopted, you all recall, we had the shifting of the Trader Lane green. We also had a design of Trader Lane done that I think pushes the green a little bit. Based on the reality of how that street would need to lay out, so going back in and saying, well, if it's gonna be that, does it need to expand somewhere else? Things like that, or does there need to be another green space mapped into that official map somewhere, or more than another one? We can talk about that too.
I know this is not exactly what we're talking about, but just to kind of build on what you're saying, I was on a mission to find Pokemon cards in an emergency situation.
Wait, Sheila, do you have a 4-year-old?
And ended up in the comic shop, and that area is doing the downstairs commercial thing, and like it is starting to feel
And it's cool.
very nice and cool, and that particular store is starting to kind of create what really felt like a community. I mean, I walked in and there was just like a ton of people there playing Magic. It was so cool. Like, not a thing that I'm into, but like I was just like, this is awesome. Like, this is what we wanted, is this kind of space. So like, and I've had a couple other interactions in that space that felt like that is actually happening in that built environment, which was great.
It's become a real magnet.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. And I think personally, that the hotel near Healthy Living has improved the aesthetic of that area. I've gotten fewer complaints about the crossing apartments, I think, because that hotel
Is in front
now
of it.
in front of it.
Mhm. It looks really nice.
No, I really have. I think it's like all of a sudden it kind of like
Mhm.
creates this visual block that's different.
Mhm.
No more Soviet landscape.
Those pitched roofs, Jeff.
And street trees.
And street trees. Yeah, no, that's true.
It was a surprise to me, for all the concern we had about it, to see pitched roofs with solar panels installed on their north sides. So, whatever happened, they're on the south sides too.
Oh.
But on both the hotel building and the apartment building, there are just as many panels on the north facing side of those pitched roofs. So the math must have worked
Right.
to put them there, despite the less than ideal aspect. It's really cool. I will say one thing I noted recently, I had not had dinner inside the farmhouse restaurant. I'd never had dinner when it was Railroad Main, and of course, all of the true street trees and landscaping around it are bigger now than they were. And what really surprised me was the view from sitting in a booth at Farmhouse out of its windows. You didn't see the parking lots around it at all. You didn't really see the streets around it.
Yeah.
You saw the trees, the lights, the park elements, and then form-based code and otherwise the buildings all framed the view. And there was a really strong sense, just sitting in this back booth at the farmhouse, that I was in a place, as opposed to, the view of the Longhorn parking lot and the Staples beyond or something. So I think the density and granularity is sort of starting to come together in a way where you can kind of feel like, oh, okay, this makes sense, this works. So I think that was a real positive.
Can I just make a quick observation? I think all of the positive things that we've just mentioned have been in areas where there is quite a lot of housing. And I think that's what is going to be the tricky part about the sort of southwestern section, including Trader Lane.
Yes.
I mean, getting that to a point where a hotel would think about ground floor amenities or shops or something like that really depends on, they need to depend not only on the people who are staying in their own hotel, but a sort of critical mass of residents. And I think really both Cottonwood Crossing and whatever the whole Finney, et cetera, quadrant, I think the residential density there is what is lifting everything. And I think so as we think ahead to Trader Lane and other sort of sticky spots that were like, wow, I wish this would, something would happen here. I think we just need to really keep that in mind, that it's those apartment buildings and condos and those kinds of residential uses that are really allowing some of those businesses.
And having that mixed use, having the
Yes.
first level, to your point, the first level
Right.
businesses will give people a reason to get out and walk around as opposed to get in their cars and drive elsewhere to do what they're
Yeah.
going to do. So,
I do think that's a really good point. If we were ever to make Chapin's vision true, and there was a reason to go like to a community site right there, that could help with that, right? Like if you're like going to, you can tell a stage of life meant going to your kid's soccer game, and then like there's a line of shops right there, and like that's, draw people.
It's like Richmond on a Friday night. Or like with the farmer's market, when the farmer's market is there and Stone's Throw is there and everyone has their kids running around in the park and on the soccer fields and like walking across the street to get their creamy and the other restaurant, like it all synergizes
Yeah.
because people have like a bunch of different reasons to be there for, yeah.
Emily, Emily's online and was waiting for an update on Teams, or was telling us on Teams she was waiting for an update. Emily, do you have some observations or comments you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, so thinking back over to the annex, before the annex was the annex, it was Essex Alliance Church. So there were plans for ball fields and recreation fields, but they were still privately owned. It was going to be a private facility. When we drafted the form-based code, it was the first time ever that, we put official designated park spaces on a public map. So that was a huge step. And I think it is time to think about refining it. We know more about some of the constraints and land costs and topography and all of these things that go into choosing the best place to plan for public spaces. The second thing I want to note is the Trader Lane Hotel project was really interesting for me to take a look at the form-based code buildings that have gone through, and we were kind of missing that hotel standard where it's a structure that it functions more like residential. It probably needs to look more residential on the first floor. And the lifespan of a hotel is it's more likely to be converted to residential long term than any other adaptive reuse in the future. So I think there's a way to find a balance of a building that is still form-based code, does have some of those shop frontages within it, but maybe some of those hotel room windows on the first floor look more like the apartment building next door. And as long as there's those entrances and, a more prominent corner, I think it could still be a good form-based code building. It's just getting someone like Jeff to help us with the numbers and what that specific standard would look like in the code. Yes, those are some of my thoughts and takeaways leading up to this form-based code scope of work project.
Thank you. Jeff, are there other things that would be helpful to hear about?
He had put some stuff in the chat, but I didn't catch it.
Yeah, so, I can read that off if we want.
Sure.
So plant canopy street trees where they belong along both sides of Marshall Avenue. Screening can be a positive thing. And then when we were talking about the trees around the hotel and the new apartment, he says, in 4 years, I bet the trees will take a quantum step up in their presence. And then, yeah, he said typically retail lags behind residential. Residential makes sense.
Which is too bad, but hard to escape that. But in terms of other things, yes, ideally, you'd all come along on the 26th. So we can talk about anything and everything in a real free-flowing way.
Where are we meeting?
Haven't decided yet, but my guess is we'd go for like the LLB parking lot.
Yeah.
To start, and then we might spend some time there, and then we might decide to debark for the Hannaford parking lot. To actually get on the ground over by Trader Lane, take a look over there.
And what time is that again?
I'm tentatively saying we'd start around 3 o'clock. I'm just gonna try to block it out. And then. See where people land in terms of when they could be somewhere.
Okay.
Like staff, Jeff will be there, you know.
To be determined.
Yeah, Jeff will be probably here at our office for a while in the morning and early afternoon, then at some point we're gonna say, heck, let's head down there and just be available. And it can be pretty informal, but we'll make sure that if a quorum of you shows up, we're not having an illegal meeting.
Make no decisions.
No business, no business. Yeah.
Right, anything else?
We'll get that follow-up out to you.
Right. Look forward to seeing you, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks,
I
Jeff.
mean, we did adopt your code and get a couple buildings built. That's.
Hey.
That's a good thing.
I'm happy about it for sure.
Alright, and so maybe, and you can explore just adding to the scope of work a little bit about the other
Yeah, we can
space.
talk about
What is it
that.
called? That's why am I blanking on the name of that, so.
Mixed use commercial.
Gateway, wasn't it gateway?
There's
Okay.
Further down.
Alright, moving on. Trader Lane, Tier 1A, TIF chip sewer timelines.
So, really good segue from the comment about, geez, we need some residential over in that Trader Lane area if we're gonna have people wanna do some ground floor retail. So there are a bunch of converging issues, projects, opportunities, challenges, however you wanna look at them, that are all related to getting Taft Corners off the ground, particularly the southwest portion of Taft Corners. So I think most of what we're looking at, other than the idea of getting Trader Lane built, might apply to any infill development or, you know, outer Cottonwood, et cetera. And so just taking these in order, and as a, I guess, first off, back out as a broad thing, what Melinda and I have spent a lot of time talking to each other about the last couple of weeks is there's all of these moving parts that are pieces of the success of the continued development and infill of that area. There are some new tools we have, like CHIP, essentially the project-based tax increment finance district program that allows for housing to be built. Tax increment financing itself, the literal project of trying to get a new public street constructed. And then the side issues of some of the things that might make that and the development that would follow it a little easier, like Tier 1A designation, where the town is now administering the Act 250 conditions, and those projects are not going back to the district commission for permits. And that could be both the private development, but you know, another thing that generally needs an Act 250 permit is a new street. So wouldn't it be nice if we had tier 1A designation rather than having to go get an Act 250 permit for Trader Lane, for example? So we can talk about these a couple different ways. But Trader Lane is an official map designation. It's a street specification in the form-based code, right? You all, most of you participated in that. It's also a project to build a new public street. It's gonna cost a whole ton of money. And there are some different ways of trying to get that money. One of them is through tax increment financing. One of them is by spending transportation impact fee revenue that the town has saved up and really needs to spend on something that helps mitigate traffic problems in the area, which Trader Lane would. It's part of the study that informs our fee.
Melinda, do you mind just like bringing up a map?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I have one on my screen and I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
wow, I'm really lost without it.
And some of whether Trader Lane is built or when Trader Lane is built, particularly if you're looking at using one of those TIF or CHIP funding mechanisms, is will private development follow the construction of the road almost immediately? Because that's what you need to create the increment that you can then take the tax revenue from and pay for the road. So the development is desirable from a housing production and an infill and a town plan goal perspective. It's also necessary in a dollars and cents way if you're trying to use increment revenue to create the road. And what helps the development happen? Well, the form-based code helps the development happen, right? Because it allows the density that somebody would probably need to have to decide to go on that project. Also, the tier 1A, which would take not just the road, but the private development out of the Act 250 jurisdiction and bring that permit review in-house here. So let's let's start with just everybody looking at the map. Yeah, I might want to just talk about all of what Trader Lane is as a project. So keep in mind on this map, the streets that have black borders are constructed. The streets that don't have black borders are not constructed, but required to be accommodated under the official map. So Trader Lane, you know, the street that's there, which includes sort of the end of the Hannaford driveway is there outlined in black. Yeah, we'll put the image under it. There we go. And then goes north all the way to Williston Road. It also, the project involves the construction of Wright Avenue from its corner at Merchants Row. So right about under the I in Wright, going all the way down. Well, now it's not the I in Wright. That bit of red road, essentially, from Merchants Road down to Trader Lane would be part of that project as well, connecting that in. So that's Trader Lane, that's the area.
And those little bits, right, surrounding the full yellow prongs
Yeah,
still
so,
need to be built.
yeah, none of that.
Cause
Yeah.
right now, that's just the little U that goes around Resource.
Right, none of that, none of those side streets down to Harvest Lane exist today. We heard a little bit from the hotel developers about the challenge of building Green Street off the side of Bed Bath and Beyond, given some of the grades there. And, you know, more of that might be understood as coming in piecemeal as development happens, than necessarily the town jumping out and building it. Trader Lane is really the project focus, but the town has a plan and a regulatory document that says where those streets need to go. Somewhere in between those and Trader Lane would be something like the street that's behind Hannaford. pretty necessary for the build out of that Trader Merchants Row, Wright Avenue. Block, but maybe comes in as a component of a private project. And roughly on this map, if you know what it's like out there, and we'll see this when we go in the field, the north-south streets are more flat and the east-west streets tend to slope down toward Harvest Lane. And we've talked with Jeff a little bit about some of the development code things we might do to deal with, getting good street frontage on those sloped streets. So that's the context, and then as one component, we're gonna work with Jeff on any tune-ups to the zoning we wanna make. As another component, we're gonna continue to work with the planning commission and select board on being in a good place to consider those financial instruments that might get Trader Lane built, TIF and CHIP. So, Melinda's been to the select board with the CHIP presentation. We've got the green light to continue working on a CHIP policy for the select board to adopt or to consider adopting that would help them not go into a yes or no use CHIP on this project decision cold. They would go in with some adopt guardrails about that. And then we get to tier 1A, which is something we've said in the town plan that Williston wants to do. And it's something that the town will need to apply to the land use review board to get that designation. And in order to get that designation, I'm gonna really paraphrase here, but we basically need to show the LURB that the town of Williston can regulate development in a way that will cause it to comply with the criteria that it would have to comply with under Act 250. And that we have the capacity and regulatory ability to carry forward any Act 250 conditions that are on the underlying property in our own system. Is that roughly
Uh-huh.
what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So we have to show the LURB those things. And we've identified at least one issue in the town plan,
Yeah,
which is we did all this amazing planning and it was all very innovative. But we never actually just listed out the land use designation areas and said what their purpose was. It's all over the plan, like this is the ag rural and here's this whole chapter about rural landscape. But we never have a thing that just says, this is ag rural. The reason it's ag rural is because in a paragraph more, so.
Yeah.
So we've been talking to the regional planning commission, sort of their advice was, you should probably do a town plan amendment and just get this one thing in, so it lines up with the way statute asks for it, and you're not having to explain, well, it's all in there, but you have to kind of, know where to look. In terms of the zoning bylaw. What are we silent on? Archaeological resources?
yeah, archaeological, ag soil mitigation. Like there was one other
In the zoning.
In the zoning.
in the zoning,
Other
uh,
historic buildings outside of the village.
Yeah, right,
Yep, so there's some bylaw amendments we may want to make before we pursue that 1A designation.
Mhm.
And then a little bit internally, and actually maybe even in the bylaw procedurally, talking about what is the procedure. If we have 1A designation, what's our procedure gonna be for identifying those conditions that should carry forward on a project and then, implementing them in any new development review and enforcing them going forward. So, the example, the guidance by the LURB gave was like, let's say you have a old Act 250 permit for a place and it's got a gravel parking lot. And there's a big long Act 250 condition about dust control. But the new project proposes to pave that parking lot. Well, you can safely drop the dust control condition and you just write a fine and say, this is no longer necessary.
Then you have stormwater issues.
Right, you may be saying, however,
Right.
But-
we have
like-
new conditions now about water quality.
But like we addressed stormwater,
Mhm.
pretty pretty adequately in our bylaw, and it's pretty comparable to the way that Act 250 addresses stormwater.
And this is a question out of sheer ignorance, as we pursue this potential transfer of responsibility, if you will, from LURB to the town of Williston, our own planning capability. How do we ensure that we do in fact have what it takes to be able to administer all the things that come with that?
Trial and error.
Is there any kind of?
Being recorded.
Well, so here's the thing, I don't know whether this will actually be enacted, but there's an amendment going through the legislature right now, that would make it easier in that permits would only, Act 250 permits would only be transferred to the town when the property comes in for some kind of, for an amendment to that permit.
Oh.
So not all at once, like it wouldn't be like we, all of a sudden we have these 400 Act 250 permits that we have to enforce. But they would sort of dribble in, which would,
Good.
is gonna be really helpful, and you know, who knows, maybe along the way, some amendments will have to be made to, you know, those provisions in Act 181, like, you know, there may be things that happen that are unanticipated that may need to be addressed, so, I don't know.
But do you have the staffing capacity to do that?
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I think what we would be working on internally, yeah, sure.
We're gonna have to get a little more concrete than that,
But one of the things is to work with applicants and, you know, we rely heavily in Williston on application checklists and, you know, minimum amounts of information people need to give us for permits.
Yeah,
I would hope to come up with an application that said, okay, applicant, you need to go over to the district office in Essex and look up your Act 250 permit and tell us what it says.
provide us with all of the
Tell us,
conditions.
yeah, you know, tell us how your proposal aligns with or which of these need to be modified, but not put the onus on staff to go do that research project. But yeah, you know, there will be writing a section of a staff report about Act 250 conditions and things that originate from something other than Williston's bylaws. There will be some training with the Development Review Board and training internally for the staff about, well, what does it mean when we've got a condition like that we have to
Yeah.
deal with?
Yeah, so they list like 6 different criteria as to, I guess, why you would like either amend or drop an Act 250 condition. And I forget like what each one is, but just, I don't know, for example, it might be because there's a state agency that has jurisdiction over that, you know, basically that condition, like something related, a condition related to stormwater, a state stormwater permit. Well, there's a state stormwater division that handles all that, so that would basically be their jobs to enforce. So you could, you know, essentially drop that condition. And then, and you know, that goes for wetlands and other, you know, anything that is under jurisdiction of another state agency could be, you know, basically, we wouldn't have the onus to enforce. It would just go to that state agency. That's one thing, and then, you know, then it's, if a permit condition is no longer relevant, like it has to do with construction. You know, conditions around construction, which a lot of these Act 250 conditions are, you know, about the construction phase. So if it's already been constructed, then those are no longer relevant. So there's, I don't know, just, yeah, it might end up being a fairly short list of extra conditions that
Yeah.
we would have to
Actually, of
attach.
course.
Yeah,
Okay,
So we're working on drawing up a timeline that shows all this stuff, but for example, it would be really nice to have tier 1A designation before we need to go apply for permits to build Trader Lane.
Yeah.
It would be really nice to have tier 1A designation before someone's really trying to get private development along Trader Lane permitted. Because it saves them a step. And there are, for some smaller projects, there are interim exemptions from Act 250 that are likely to carry forward in the bill, either to 2028 or 2030, depending on whose version gets adopted, what gets signed, but same interim exemptions that we're under now are likely to be extended for a couple of years. So we're not gonna go off a cliff with this, but it's kind of like, you know, when you sit down at the beginning of a big project and start looking at all the dependencies and realize really you don't have a whole lot of time to get where you're going. And Trader Lane is a long-term project, and there is obviously a funding challenge. It's somebody else's land that needs to be, a willing partner in its construction, who also stands to unlock the developable land all around them. There's good reason for that owner to work with us on it. There are other permits that we can't get out of. If we get federal money, we need to do a NEPA process, a National Environmental Policy Act process around Trader Lane. That will take time and money. So there are partnerships, probably with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, or the use of some of their consulting help as well. And again, we need to plan in our budgets, in our timeframes to get out ahead of that. And all of this, of course, ultimately, there are decisions that the planning commission might recommend one way or another, but will need to be made by the select board. So at this stage, it's like we're just trying to line up all those elements, set things up for success and achievement of town plan actions. And at the same time, make sure we're helping the planning commission be really well informed on that, and then ultimately the select board really well informed on that. So that if those decision points come, like, gosh, we really need a consultant for this part of the project, should we hire someone? And then going and having that conversation with a board that understands that that's a piece of the puzzle, and not just, geez, the planning office wants more money. Will be helpful.
So in that lineup, we would want to get tier 1A first. In order to do that, we need a town plan amendment and bylaw amendments.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be step 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then and then we'd apply for tier 1A. And then if we got tier 1A,
Mm-hmm.
the next step would be getting somebody a chip or a tip. I mean, we would have to do the TIF, but an individual project could do the chip, right?
Right, so like, we've thought even about like that entire block between Merchants Row, Trader, Hannaford, and Wright as a chip. And maybe even that supporting a phase 1 of Trader Lane. That's a possibility here as well. But we want to be, and I think a lot of the pieces of this can overlap one another in time, but there needs to be a degree of certainty. Like, if you have a developer who's interested in partnering on the residential build, who says, I'm really interested in this, but I've heard this Act 250 thing is a real bear. Am I gonna have to do that? And if you said, well, we have a pretty good degree of certainty that we've got a successful 1A application, here's all the steps we've taken, here's the ones we're anticipating taking. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's nice to say we've got it all done and 1A is in the can, but I think being able to just say we're on track with it is also really useful.
And we need some kind of an MOU with the landowner in there, somewhere in that.
There's private agreements,
Oh, yeah.
there's development agreements, there's tax revenue agreements about that when you get into TIF. Whole bunch of other moving parts. And there's some other things that won't originate from the planning office. So for example, when we're having these conversations about CHIP, some of them involve the manager's office and the finance director, because we're talking about, okay, well, now you're effectively diverting some tax revenue that would otherwise go to the statewide education fund. And there's some pretty heavy accounting requirements for that, to make sure that where you're sending that money into that project is an eligible expense, and that you're accounting for it well, and you're not, I mean, headlines of Vermont communities getting audited and getting in trouble about how they record keep for their TIFs are all over the place. We want to avoid that. So there's also building the internal infrastructure in the town. There's also interfacing with public works about having a new street to construct and maintain, and conversations about where does the planning office's role in getting a street built kind of end, and where does the project management begin for the public works folks who actually, do this stuff. So, and there's utilities needed to support all of this, and. So, as much as anything, just think of this as the first version of a conversation, trying to bring the planning commission into that world a little bit. And then what I'd hope is we can develop some kind of like one pagers that help you all see that universe of what's going on, whether it's a timeline or Gantt chart, or just sort of a spider web diagram that shows how these things are all connected. So you can all become conversant in it too. And lastly, a lot of this is just thinking about like, what's the work plan of the planning commission? And so if Global Foundry shows up and says, sure, planning commission, can we have your next 5 meetings to, do a specific plan? You're thinking about how you can integrate that in to your other work plan, and ultimately maybe how to prioritize. Or you're telling us we need to prioritize. And I'm not saying don't do global foundries. I'm just saying it will inform the conversation with someone like that. And you might be saying, yeah, that sounds great. You're really going to need to commit some resources to what you bring you. We can't write your plan for you because we've got this other one we're trying to write over here. And I'm not picking on global foundries. It could be anybody who shows up with a zoning change that, for them is the top of their list. You all know that happens.
That's my favorite topic. How to sue our allocation plan to.
Couple interesting ways. One is there is a reform, and sorry, I meant to. Did I say sewer on the agenda? I don't remember. Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. You said it. Another element of this, and it sort of aligns with the idea of making permitting as efficient as possible, is making the ability to connect to sewer and the ability to reserve capacity for new development as certain as possible and as smooth as possible. So you've all been through the attachment A process, the annual sewer budget. Doing it on that annual basis has some advantages for the town in terms of not getting too far ahead with committing capacity to projects that then take a long time to build. But it does put a drag on a developer who looks and says, well, in most communities, there's plenty of sewer capacity. I can just buy it as I need it. And I'm not worried that I'm gonna get stalled because the municipality won't provide me with that capacity. In Williston, our allocation system makes that a real concern. So, the good news is we are already in the habit of amending the sewer allocation ordinance once a year, and it's amendable at any time. So if somebody showed up tomorrow and was ready to build the most amazing town plan goal achieving project in the world, but they needed a commitment on sewer capacity, there is a mechanism to do that by going to the select board saying, hey, I've got something really great, but I need you to write into your ordinance that, there's 100,000 gallons per day. That's just for me. What I think would be better than that, though, is to start building in that support for development where you want to see development right into the ordinance, and it's just there. So now you're having that preliminary meeting with that developer who says, I want to do that Hannaford block. I need 50,000 gallons per day of sewer for those 300 to 500 units, and I need to know I've got it all so I can see my way through the project, because of those 5 buildings, I'm not making money till I'm halfway through the 5th one. If you have an ordinance that says, yep, you can have that, that's even easier than saying, well, we're very supportive of that and we can schedule a select board hearing and it'll happen a month from now, and et cetera, et cetera. So also on the list there as a supporting element is to continue work on proposing some changes to the sewer allocation ordinance to the select board. Particularly setting aside a geographic area with a chunk of capacity that's informed by our build out predictions and basically supports the build out of that area. If that's what you want to do.
So, yeah, I really wanna do that. I know we've talked about it a lot, and I think it is related to the tier one and all the other stuff, but it's also just like. I'm not sure it's ever made sense to me to reserve current capacity for an unknown future. Um. When we so desperately need like housing now, and certain things now, so I don't know. I would really like to move that forward. I'm in support of this, but also just because it's been a goal and
But
because.
we are not stopping anybody from doing anything today though, right? As in like with current allocation method, we don't have to turn down anybody and say you can do it because we don't have the resources today. Or it's not, right? That's what
No.
we see, right?
We don't, although our current new residential category is, it's about 30,000 gallons per day. So someone who had that like full block plan would not be able to get capacity in 1 year, without going and amending the ordinance.
But that's also seems like kind of a rare.
Oh, it has,
Event,
it's something
right?
that's never
Like,
happened.
it's never
It's quite risk today,
Yeah.
right? Because even those people that who have already booked are not using it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? We can
And
tell
by
them
this
to
time,
say,
yeah.
you book it, you don't use it for past 2 years. I'm gonna take it from you and move it to somebody who's gonna do that tomorrow, right?
Right.
Yeah, and we do have the ability to claw it back if somebody doesn't use it, and they do pay a lot of money to preserve it while they're not developing.
Good.
So there's a disincentive to hold it for a long, long time. It's also a really nice revenue stream for the sewer fund. Because they're just paying to keep a number on a spreadsheet essentially. And I mean, they're paying that we can't, sell it out to somebody else. I will say that is a difference, too. The system we have now tends to favor our local development community such that they have any familiarity with the system and have a little more faith that they're not gonna see 30,000 gallons on the books this year and 0 gallons next year. They've seen the track record and they understand. It's more when you're talking with somebody bigger who's not from here. And we've had a couple of those conversations. They go, I'm gonna need to do what? And one of the challenges, whether you're talking about Vermont or Williston or Taft Corners or this quadrant of Taft Corners, is scale. And getting something off the ground where someone can see their way through a profitable development, because they won't do it if it isn't. Scale helps. And so things that support scale and long range planning can help too. So that's my pitch for thinking about maybe a more geographic, less use-based system of allocation and building some more flexibility into it.
Yeah, so like, yeah, even though we're not seeing applicants, like to your point, Mickey, where it's like, well. Like, we're not seeing people push up against it, there's self-selection that's happening. Of like, well, why would I propose a big project if I know that I cannot get that? And like we saw it with the Glazer project, even where it's like, this isn't like someone who's standard in a different realm, but it was for like growth management of like, I don't wanna hope that next year I'll get my units. I just wanna know ahead of time and have a consistent schedule and like have the certainty that I can complete my big project. So, yeah, I think I agree with everything that's happening. Like, we should do this even if we're not like seeing someone who's like running up against it right at this moment. There's self-selection for larger projects probably happening.
Would you say that Trader Lane is definitely kind of like top priority then? In, in all the various chunks and pieces that we might look at, would you, so I'm gathering that that is the case because you put on this list on the agenda. But I just wondered, like, are there other things that are close to that, or is it just like, yeah, far and away, that is absolutely top priority?
Far and away, it's the top priority, although I do think a lot of that priority comes from momentum. As opposed to outright, like, this is the thing. But I think that, Trader Lane as something for the town to put energy in, when you look at, whether it's achievement of town plan goals or walkability, mixed use downtown goals for Taft Corners. It's a priority for the town to put energy into because of the things that might happen with the Grid Street build out or the public spaces. It's probably the most difficult one.
Mhm.
It's big, it's expensive, it's dealing with some slopes and some stormwater and wetland issues. It is probably the piece of infrastructure that's least likely to happen without some help. So some of those other streets we've drawn on the map are easier to do in smaller bites, or they're on flatter land, or, you know, are a more natural extension of something that's already going on. So like I was gonna answer your question, say, well, Trader Lane's the only thing that's on the top 10 list for funding through the Northern Borders folks and on the Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation list, but it's true that it's on those lists and it's a priority, and it's a project of regional impact in the eyes of those bigger organizations, and has been for a very long time. But I wouldn't discourage anybody from backing out and looking at the bigger map ever and saying, well, what about, you know, or saying, if we ran into a total roadblock to
Right.
building Trader Lane, is there something else on this map
Yeah.
that we would spend our impact fee money and our staff time and energy on? Or if a partner showed up looking at a different prospective piece of infrastructure in Taft Corners and said, if you all will partner with me, I'm ready to go. I wouldn't, at the stage we're at today, I wouldn't say, oh, we won't even consider that because we're hitched to Trader Lane.
Right.
So, you know,
That's
things can
really
change.
helpful. I guess because always in the background is the fact that ultimately the market really controls so much of this, not sort of our internal work, but the success for moving from A to B in a bunch of these steps is very market dependent. And in fact, even kind of individual developer dependent, not even the broader economic
Yeah.
setting. So that, you know, that always worries me a little bit, and it's a lot of work and effort on our part for something that is very ephemeral and we know can crash or boom with very little warning. Or with a lot of warning. And so I just always want to be thinking also, like, what are some other things that we should, like, as a planning commission, what are some other things that we should be kind of always attending to? And the things that come to mind immediately are things that show, you know, a quick, small fix. Like, can we also, while we do these big things, can we also have a list of quick, small fixes, right? To kind of some pinpointed things, you know, maybe it's a chunk of sidewalk, or maybe it's or like maybe it's that we're dealing with that hotel on Hurricane Lane that wants to change to housing. You know, what can we also do for the community in shorter term? That's always kind of like I don't know, just a baseline. Yep, this is what the planning commission is working on. You know, we've got these little things, we're churning them out all the time. Yeah, we got this big thing here. But like, not lose sight of those little small wins for community focused kinds of things. And maybe this is already in place, but I just want to kind of put a plug in for our community relations and, you know, that moment in the grocery store when we try to start explaining about tier 1A. And people are just like, but I really just want some street trees, you know.
Well, you can't have those till the end.
Right.
Well,
Can I just, before you go, I do wanna say, I would, this isn't totally to your point, Megan, but like. Tier 1A sewer allocation. And like the process for the chip. For considering chip. While it supports the Trader Lane stuff, that is like a town-wide. Benefit for many projects going forward, right? That's not a Trader Lane.
Sure.
None of those are Trader Lane specific.
Okay, that's
Right, like to your point, like what if this thing just never gets off the ground?
mhm.
Getting tier 1A or getting the guidelines for chip is still worth it because. There might be many other projects that come down the line, right?
And may seem really ephemeral right now. I mean, it sort of does because it just seems like it's hard to, you know, it just takes a while to kind of get any movement there. But I don't know, I'm hopeful that it'll result in some wins down the road.
Yeah, that doesn't address your little project thing, but I do think it's important for us to think about it, not as. Just Trader Lane.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think that,
Specific.
yeah.
See your little projects?
Well, one plug I wanna put in is. What we budgeted for upcoming fiscal year, one of our big projects is bicycle
yeah, that's
pedestrian master plan.
Yeah.
And. I'm not gonna predict the outcome of this right now, but one of the things we've talked about. Melinda went to the bike ped conference this year, down in southern Vermont and. Learned about it was a big project. That
Yeah.
took 10 years.
Right, so your typical like sidewalk, build a chunk of 100-foot chunk of sidewalk in a historic village is now in year 10 of planning. Hope to go to construction in 2027, started planning in 2017.
Yeah.
So just, I mean, and that's pretty typical,
So I think when we think about developing that plan, we've had these sort of prioritization conversations with some of the interested parties before, like. Do you just throw all your effort into the big win that's gonna take 10 or 15 years? Do you just try to identify the quickest, smallest win that you can do right now? And I think the answer is yeah, do both. And so I'm kind of hoping that the bike ped plan for Williston expresses that. And says, yep, there's these big goals that we always want to be moving toward, that are multi-step and that require putting together, a stack of funding and all that good stuff. And also over here. We need to fix the wayfinding so that the sign for the turn happens before the turn, not after.
yeah, I mean, there are some little sort of mini. Projects like that are sort of kind of happening in the background and it's kind of. I think it's important to give them some air space and to let people know that they're happening just as they are. Like, they're important, but in a sort of a smaller scale.
Well, and that's what people encounter every day in the landscape, right? In their daily activities and, it's like how bad the pavement is on Old Stage Road right now. Right where you're gonna ride your bike, only that stretch. But, and those kinds of things, I realize that's a DPW thing, but, just kind of like those very kind of. Granular, everyday types of things, just wanna make sure that we don't. Kind of, as we said, like, kind of put all of our time and effort into those big things. I've had completely forgotten about the bike ped plan, so that's great. That's a really good one.
Felt like that's a small, I mean, it's sort of like it's a small thing, but it's bigger than, well, I don't know. It's just sort of a medium thing, I guess.
It's a medium thing, but
Yeah,
I mean, I
it's
think,
visible from the community and it's very understandable and people
Right.
can see, something that is meaningful to either them or people they know, like, oh, you're gonna be able to do this, and, oh, this plan has been created from all those meetings I went to, over the years, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
I wonder also kind of to your point, like the thing you said earlier about, what makes these like retail or whatever space is successful as housing, and like, when we look at this new area, housing's not there, and how all of these things really lag, like, there's currently no road there. And we're like, okay, we're gonna build a road, or we're gonna figure out how to pay for it, and then we're gonna permit it, and then we're gonna build it, and then they're gonna build stuff on it, and like, it's like a very long, it's like a really long range, and so, like, are there supporting projects in the area that we can help with? Like, there was that building that was permitted that never got built under form-based code, like, what went, like, I know we kind of revisited around, like, yeah, there was just like market conditions in the way that they designed it, made them not build it, but like, is there stuff that's in infrastructure, like in areas that we already have close to the right infrastructure that like can be supporting projects, so that when this road goes up, it is more successful, and like, we can point to like, yes, this thing didn't take 20 years, it took less, but kind of like, are there like supporting projects in the area that we're kind of like just not focusing on, because we have this like big, like, Trader Lane is our big gold standard, it'll be amazing and it will be like the future, but like, what's in between now and the future, I guess.
Yeah. I think some of the opportunity that the CHIP program presents to us, some of where we've identified these individual lots where we think that might help make the difference.
Police barracks.
Yeah, keep pushing on the state police barracks, or
Did that get sold? No.
no.
But like, are there any other infill type projects that CHIP might be helpful with that are already on roads that exist, and where we want there to be housing then?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in fact, like just today, Melinda and I were talking and getting some clarification from people who know about how CHIP can be used to pay for offsite infrastructure improvements. So, things like impact fees or sewer fees that pay for some piece of the improvement of the system that the new development is tapping into. And we were basically asking the questions like, well, can someone pay their sewer allocation and their sewer connection fees using CHIP money? And the answer is basically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really great, because I think I did the numbers on a 50-unit apartment building, sewer alone is about $100,000. So if you can say to a developer, assuming the select board is amenable to saying yes to a CHIP project in that scenario, which we also need to, build some understanding on and talk through. If you say to a developer, well, we need the sewer money because we need to fix things and make things have more capacity, but you can use your tax increment revenue to pay us that money. So take your pro forma and take that $100,000 expense that was due at the time of permit out of it. Because the CHIP funding is gonna pay for that. Does that make things better for you? And there's no getting around that. We're just in an extremely difficult environment for any kind of development, even residential, even though there's a housing crisis. It's very hard. What we're hearing from developers and people who talk to developers is, other than the really top end sort of luxury, Cambrian Rise type stuff, it's very hard to make a sort of like a mid-market apartment building pencil right now.
So frustrating.
Just because everything's expensive, including money. So I hope CHIP works, but anybody who's afraid that like there's gonna be too much CHIP money blowing around in the state, it's like, not anytime soon that we can see. But yeah, I mean, we have a map with lots that are on streets where no new street needs to be built, where there is land that you can rubber stamp, an existing form-based code building and its site and say, you could fit that there.
Yeah.
And yet somebody's not doing it, and
Have you seen any uptake of the 802 homes process with the pre-developed floor plan, architectural specs?
So, they're not like quite done
Not
with
quite
the,
ready, yeah.
but there has been a lot of uptake in their, what can I call it? emerging builders trainings. They've had a lot of people at those trainings, like I think they had 75 at the one in Millbury. And so that's good, I mean,
That's
that's
good,
kind of
yeah.
encouraging. And then they're working on kind of finalizing those 802 homes, designs, but yeah, I mean, it'd be great if, you know, say, like, we wanted to adopt those designs here into our bylaw or something, and just say like, you know, if you build something that, with one of these designs or something, you know, we'll give you a permit for it.
Yeah. I'm just imagining sort of like a fast track process or something
That's the
on our
idea.
side. I mean, they're fast tracking the design,
Yeah,
for the, I think it's 10 different
Yep.
options, and some of them are like quadplex, and some of them are duplex or whatever, and some are single family homes. And I mean, it would be kind of interesting thought exercise even for an infill approach to think about, okay, if you had these, you know, these plans and, you know, where could you put them in
Yeah.
Williston with a minimal amount of red tape and cost and, you know, all those things.
that would be a
Um,
exercise.
Sounds like a really interesting, I would love to see that map.
Yeah, like cut out a bunch of those little
Yeah.
designs. And
Right.
then just like,
Yeah, just
They
where,
put one of
Dig
those
'em
there,
up.
and one of those there. I'm just trying to think a little bit of, again, kind of somewhat faster turnaround things, you know, not that I'm opposed to the. I'm absolutely committed to Trader Lane and all, but also separately, as you point out, to, you know, the T1A, Tier 1A, status and so forth. But also just thinking practically, like, you know, what would that map look like?
Well, it might be interesting to think, so I recently took the survey where they were asking for comment on those designs.
Oh, yeah, I meant to do that.
It's worth it just to get the
Yeah.
preview of what they are, but they're basically like Vermont vernacular multifamily, generally 2 stories, sometimes 2 stories with an attic story. Buildings, and like I said, everything from a single unit dwelling with an ADU or an ADU potential, all the way up to. There's like a 6-plex or an 8-plex kind of, you know, Milltown row home kind of
Right.
thing. And you might look at those even in the form-based code district where we have sort of that, I forget what we call the strollable neighborhood street, the lowest intensity one where we kind of imagined row homes and just said, any of these are fine.
Right.
Cause I think they would be, and they would be about the same density.
Yeah.
And whether that gets, I mean, the other thing I would love to do is. You know, what I had hoped the form-based code would encourage, and it has where people have used it. Is it encourages people to replat these blocks and create developable lots and break up ownership a little bit ultimately, and. If I could do anything to Taft Corners right now. I would replat it into lots that make sense for the form-based code, and I would just be a total communist, and I'd just redistribute it from 4 owners to, you know, 400 owners. And you get 400 different ideas about what to build there.
Yeah.
And different tolerances for risk, right? And different timeframes and all of those things, and that is a challenge Williston faces. Due to our smallness and just, you know, there's kind of like half a dozen people, and it's about their tolerance for risk and their preference of what they like to build and their ability to work with us on our zoning and our infrastructure build out. And that's, you know, that's just our world. But it's surprising sometimes when you think about it that way and go, yeah, it's, you know, it's not just like what makes sense, but it's like what and that this landowner is interested in and, you know, wants to do or has experience doing, and there is a lot of diversity in that world. I'd love to see, you know, the thing about like 75 small builders showing up. That's great for the state. That's really cool. I hope every one of them goes and finds a village center somewhere to build something in, but we're gonna be different, at least initially.
Okay, I do think so it sounds like you're gonna do these chip guidelines. Is a thing that has to happen soon. For the select board.
Yeah, I mean, so we're a little at the whim of the select board schedule. And I don't know when the next time they're gonna be discussing this. It may not be until like July sometime. But the idea
Right,
is we
yeah.
wanna get them thinking about.
Yeah.
About it and, you know, actually thinking, drafting policy, you know, seeing fish.
And then the other one is looking at an amendment to the town plan, so maybe just getting that in front of us, the draft of that in front of us, that's the, whatever, the index that we don't have. Cause that seems
Yeah.
pretty simple, and then the bylaw sounds more complicated, right? The bylaw amendment that we would have to do to become tier 1A.
I don't think it's gonna be that complicated, but we have to kind of think a little bit about how we wanna do it.
How we wanna do it, and then there's just a procedural timeline of doing hearings and all that stuff. Just think about when we slot that in.
Cause I think I would like to do the sewer thing this summer. If we did the sewer piece along with the town plan amendments, like those feel achievable. Am I off there?
No, I think so.
Emily didn't roll her eyes at me, that's good. So then we could maybe batch them in the hearing.
Yeah, and the sooner we sort of put that together, the sooner I can talk to the town manager about what the capacity looks like at the select board, and I know they were gonna do. At least one sort of retreat type meeting to talk about sewer, so this is on everybody's mind. There's some I don't think the changes to sewer are gonna look all that dramatic. Or be all that dramatic, it's just more about convenience and perception when someone's planning something. So. I hope that goes fairly smoothly. But it's just time, and I mean, roughly, I'm thinking like now through December, it's like we're trying to get all those regulatory and town plan things done. And we're trying, I mean, what did we say about getting a tier 1A application in?
I
And
think
for
we're-
it to be here?
Yeah, I think we're looking at towards the end of the year.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the outcome of the library.
Oh,
Vote. The yes vote was 1597 and the no vote was 1537.
oh, God,
60?
60.
Jeez,
That's low turnout too.
yeah,
Okay.
36%.
36%.
and what was the vote in favor of the bond? At town meeting?
Want to say like 40.
Also about 60 difference, but
Yeah,
it was in the 2000s range.
Mm.
I don't remember exactly.
hmm,
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, distracting. Okay, so. You were saying application. End of the year, you think for tier 1A, yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. Good call. All right,
I think that's all I've got.
any other comments?
Very helpful.
Sounds like a busy summer and fall.
Yeah.
It always is, I mean, you know. it
And
is-
then in the middle of all that, we'll do the Jeff. Send the Jeff. Information, but that doesn't have tasks for you guys necessarily. Coming out of that, at least not immediate.
Not immediate, I mean, what we'll end up with is, you know, the code document with any changes in a form that we can take through the adoption
Yeah.
process, and I think probably we wanna do the things we need to do to get to tier 1A first.
Yeah.
If the code stuff makes sense to piggyback in there, great. We're gonna be doing bylaw amendments like all the time. You've seen my big list. I'm gonna slap that on the end of the agenda pretty much perpetually from now on as well, so. We'll do that.
Okay,
Great. Well, thanks, everybody.
last set.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone. Bye,
Guys.
Chapin. Bye, Emily.